Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Nick Phillips. I'm a journalist with Arizona Capital Times, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate, and this evening we have the Democratic and Republican candidates for State Senate from Legislative District 3. As the moderator, I'll ensure the candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents tonight. The questions that will be asked are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. And this survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capital Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. And of course, we want to hear directly from you, voters. So if you're watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by email by sending an email to debates@kc-a.com, by sending a text message to 480-808-1814, or by calling the phone number 480-937-1253. If you do reach out by any of these methods, please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for both of the candidates tonight. We'll screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on the candidates. And this debate is scheduled to last for about 1 hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. For the candidates, you'll have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and approximately 90 seconds for your responses to the voters' questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents, and if you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. The candidates running for State Senate for District 3 are the Democratic nominee, Mr. Thomas Duggar, and the Republican nominee, Mr. John Kavanaugh. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name for opening comments and will alternate after that. That means we'll begin with Mr. Duggar and then go to Mr. Kavanaugh. So Mr. Duggar, will you please start the opening remarks?
Sure. Hi, my name is Thomas Duggar. I'm running for State Senate in LD3. I am a IT professional, information technology, and I have 35 years experience in the industry, building financial systems, information security, and information technology. I've been the CIO for several small consulting firms, consulting for Fortune 50 companies. And in the Valley, I've done several different companies, including places like Charles Schwab and PetSmart. I'm running this campaign, as you can see in the corner of my window there. My main focus right now is protecting women's rights and the right for people to protect their First Amendment rights. Right now, we have way too much rhetoric going on with all kinds of things that don't make any sense. And it's a violation of the First Amendment. And there are First Amendment violations going on all over the place. And people are they just need to stop. This is a country built on freedom, and freedom means you have your First Amendment rights. Second, I really believe that my experience in business will help me negotiate really good deals for the taxpayers for any kind of infrastructure projects we have. I know how to vet these projects. I know how to determine whether or not we're going to make money, lose money, and figure out if there's good alternatives that should have or should be considered. I've looked through the bills in the Senate and the House over the past 2.5 years, and I don't see any proper vetting process going on. I did the research to find the background. Again, none of this is being done. This is what I do for a living. What I can do is help Arizona be prosperous. And I will work across the aisle. In general, the people I work with are Republicans. I am polite and kind to Republicans, and they are polite and kind to me. I will work with Republicans, and we will get the job done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duggar. And Mr. Kavanaugh, your opening statement.
Yes, I'm State Representative John Kavanaugh, and I'm running for re-election to the Senate. I say that because it's been my pleasure to serve on the legislature for the last 16 years, and I've served in both the House and the Senate. I moved here with my wife of 46 years, Linda. We've been married for 46 years, not that she's 46 years old, although she could pass for 46. We have 2 children. They grown. One lives in Fountain Hills, the other lives in Scottsdale. We have a grandson. As my accent gives away, I was born and raised in New York City. I graduated from NYU with a degree in liberal arts. Right after graduation from NYU, I became a Port Authority police officer, where I served for 20 years, retiring as a detective sergeant. While I was a Port Authority police officer, I spent 3 years on the town council in a small town outside of where I policed. And in addition, I acquired a master's degree in government and politics. And I also eventually received a PhD in criminal justice. Upon retirement from the Port Authority Police in '93, we moved out here. We live in Fountain Hills. I taught college at ASU, but mostly at Scottsdale Community College. I retired from the Scottsdale Community College job after being there about 20 years, 2 years ago. Throughout all of my political office holding, I have always been employed full-time, again, except for the last 2 years when I'm totally retired. Although legislature, gives you a lot of, keeps my hands full. In Fountain Hills, I served as a Parks and Recreation Commission volunteer and 6 years on the town council. So I have a unique combination of academic knowledge, of political experience, which I think has done well for me in the legislature. I write a lot of good bills. I'm probably one of the people to write the most number of bills that are signed into law. I get a lot of my bills from ordinary people, and we'll probably be talking about some of them as we go through the system. And I hope that you will allow me to return to the legislature and keep doing the good work that I believe I'm doing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. So our first question will go first to you, Mr. Duggar. The new District 3 includes a lot of territory covered by the former District 23, and the old District 23 has been represented by 3 Republicans in the legislature since it was created. So my question for you is, why do you think voters in this district are ready to pick a Democrat, and why should you be that Democrat?
So now that I have access to all of the voter data, it's 45% Republican, 20% Democrat, and 39% independent. Now, the interesting statistic is that 73% of this district is pro-choice, 73%. In fact, I've lived in this district for 20 years, and I have not yet met anyone, and most of my friends are Republicans and independents. None of them are anti-abortionists. They are pro-choice. They all believe that these choices should be between a person and their physician, and bodily autonomy should always be preserved. So I have a chance to win. Now, prior to Roe versus Wade, no, I did not have a chance to win. I was not going to reach out, but I believe everybody sees the deconstruction of all the rights being done at the federal level, and they're not happy about it. Nobody likes to see their rights taken away, especially rights that have been enshrined for over 50 years. And it's very important that we stop this wave. And right now, when I see bills like the one that allows the Senate to determine the winner of the election and override the will of the people, that's anti-democracy. That is anti-democratic. And that bill, everybody who signed up on that bill is not interested in democracy anymore. They can literally keep themselves in office forever. This is the new thing that the Republican Party has decided to do. We're going to decide who wins the election, regardless of what the people say. And this has to stop. It absolutely has to stop. I saw bill after bill on voting restrictions. And some of these voting restriction bills, they're already in place. You already have to use a photo ID. And people talk about mail-in ballots. They're the most secure ballots there are. How do I know? Because I built these systems. There's nothing more secure than a mail-in ballot validating the signature. It's axiomatic. And all these attacks on our democracy really have to stop. And when I see what cyber ninjas did, now I'm an IT guy, and this is what really motivated me. I see a company come in that has no experience in cybersecurity. They say they do, but nobody vetted them. They didn't carry any liability insurance. I personally carry a $5 million plan that cost me less than $1,000 a year. We lost $3 million of voting equipment because they did not obey chain of custody, which is a basic IT 101 thing. If I had run this audit and people had said, you run the audit, the taxpayers would have saved $3 million.
Okay, all right.
This
Well, we'll have a chance to get
simple thing.
We'll have a chance to get further into some of these questions in just a moment. I want to give Mr. Kavanaugh a chance to speak. You can respond to some of the issues that Mr. Duggars brought up, but the question the corresponding question I want to put to you is, you've already served a decade and a half in the legislature. Why should voters pick you to represent them for another 2 sessions?
Well, I believe that experience counts. I also believe that the fact that I've been elected or re-elected 8 times shows that I must be doing something which the voters like. I also communicate with the voters quite well. I am a very accessible legislator. I meet with everybody, be it a phone call or an in-person meeting. If anybody wants to meet, constituent or not, Democrat, liberal, whatever, independent, I always meet with people because I think people have the right to communicate with their elected officials, and I get information. And if I disagree with the person, then at least I know what the opposition will be saying, and I can prepare for it. But usually it's very amiable and enjoyable. I like public policy. I became interested in politics when I was 15 years old. I went right to conservatism, even though I was in New York City. And I got a master's degree in government and politics. I'm very interested. I write a lot of bills. Most of my bills are not partisan. I do a lot of humane animal legislation. In fact, I'm pretty much the only one who does humane animal legislation. I've been voted 3 times by the Humane Society of the United States as Legislator of the Year because of the bills that I write. And I do little bills too. Constituents have a problem, they come to me. I had a constituent whose HOA was not letting her put artificial turf on her lawn, even though in the same area they permitted real turf, which was crazy. Passed the bill. Now she can do that. So a lot of people have problems and they come to me. So, but of course, I'm also known as a vocal opponent of illegal immigration. I wrote part of SB 1070. I traveled the country defending it. And illegal immigration is a massive problem now that I'm continuing to confront. And I have the experience to confront that. I'm also a fiscal conservative. I think one of the reasons why Arizona is faring a lot better in this recession is because we have low taxes and limited regulation, which caused a great deal of economic development. And I'll continue to do that. So, and one final reason is throwing people out of office or forcing them out of office, after a short period of time, creates a legislature full of novices who become overly dependent on staff or lobbyists for their information. It's not good for policymaking. I believe in term limits. I believe in 2-year term limits. Every 2 years, I'll put my record before the voters and let them decide. That's good term limits that respect the voters' decision.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm confused there. If you believe in term limits, how have you been in office for 12, 15 years?
I said I believe in 2-year term limits, meaning every 2 years we stand for election, as we do. And I'm in office for 16 years.
It's pretty easy to win elections.
And 8 times the people said, we will return Representative or Senator Kavanaugh.
Correct, because nobody runs against you.
I've had, in our district, because it's over 20% Republican, we usually have very robust primaries where the races are often determined. And I just came out of a grueling race. So yeah, I've had people run against me. I've had people spend 4 or 5 times as much money as I've spent attacking me because certain power interests don't like the things that I do. But I've been able to connect, and I think the people trust me, and I appreciate their returning me, and I hope they'll do it again.
Okay. All right, let's get into the first subject I want to talk about tonight, bread and butter issue related to the economy. Arizona has one of the highest rates of inflation in the country, and the cost of housing is also increasing quickly in many parts of the state. What will you do to work for legislation that addresses the cost of groceries, gas, and housing and helps families make ends meet? We'll go first to Mr. Kavanaugh on this one.
Sure. Well, the real solution would entail my having to run for Congress and affect the federal level, because it's at the federal level that is causing this massive inflation. I mean, you have the Biden administration during COVID pumped trillions of dollars into the economy. You know, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. And when you pump trillions of dollars into the economy, you're going to cause inflation. I mean, that's exactly what happened. And the answer there is to get a Republican Congress and president in so they can start pulling back on these crazy policies. What can we do here at the state level? Well, I'm going to keep taxes as low as possible. I'd like to lower them some more. I want to keep government regulation of business at a minimum, because that's how you create jobs, which gives people more money for their pockets and increases prosperity. So I'll continue the conservative fiscal principles that I've been advancing for the last 16 years, which help reduce the impact of this inflation and recession on Arizona. And I'll whisper and yell as I can to our congressional delegation to, stop the crazy spending.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I respond? Can I just respond really quickly?
Well, I want to give you, I want to give you a chance to give your own answer to this question. So please go ahead.
So I agree with him. This is a federal level issue, but even more than that, this is a geopolitical issue. The whole world is going through massive inflation. There is very little we can do to curtail this because we are in a cycle. Now, this was not created by Biden. This was not created by Trump. This has been ongoing for over 20 years. So to blame one party is just nonsense. Trump pumped tons of money into the economy as well. He did a pretty good job trying to get all the vaccinations started, but he got hammered for it. But he pumped trillions of dollars in the economy as well. Both parties did this to try to stop a virus that has killed over 1 million people, including 2 of my family members. So to say that this is nonsense to pump money into the economy and blame it all on Biden is just completely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And inflation is caused by low interest rates. These same low interest rates, you say, increase corporations' ability to expand. It's nonsense. Again, I am from private industry. You are not. I know how this works, and you clearly don't. And this is what I bring to Arizona. I actually understand how inflation works. And right now, the guy that I'm facing does not understand inflation. That is not how it works. It is not caused by Biden pumping money into the economy. That is not how economics work.
What do you think the legislature can do to help families who are struggling with the rising costs that are a fact of life right now?
Well, right now, we've got a ton of people that are underemployed and a lot of people that are homeless, that are completely out of the system. We don't even see it in the statistics. We need to work on our infrastructure. We need to put money into things like solar, and we have to be proactive. We have had reactive politics in this state for over 40 years. Nobody in business does reactive. We do proactive. You want to see real change in Arizona? You find a businessman like me, a small business owner working for big business companies. I am going to change the face of this state. I am going to make sure people have good jobs, and that is how you fight inflation. Better jobs. You don't just run around cutting taxes for the rich. What we've got is bill after bill, cutting taxes for the rich, cut taxes for the rich. People believing that trickle down actually works. It's been debunked 1 million times. It's completely wrong. There is an economist in the world that thinks that works. The way that you fight inflation is to increase state revenue. You increase state revenue by bringing in more businesses. You bring in more businesses by bolstering our education system. Because the top companies, they don't want to move here because we're ranked dead last in education. You want to get them in here? Invest in our kids, our future, and our infrastructure, and the money will come.
Okay, I want to move on. Mr. Kavanaugh, I'm going to give you just a moment.
Real quick. I certainly agree with Mr. Duggar that both parties have had people in Washington that have spent too much money. But everybody, even Democrat and analysts, concede that Biden went totally over the top. Trillions of dollars. And everyone knows that that's what fuels inflation. So, I don't think we can say Biden's just one more person who did
So
that.
I prefer you
I would
say
also say
proportions.
that we have put money into
just not true.
infrastructure. We have put money into infrastructure because of the low taxes and the low regulation. We have a booming economy in Arizona, which gave us extra revenue. We put a massive amount of money into infrastructure. Roads and highways. So we're doing that. And in terms of education, we did record funding for education this year. Even the Democrats were very happy and pleased with the amount of money that we put in education. And also, don't judge Arizona based upon the funding amount in a ranking. Judge us by our performance, where our children perform. And our children are not at the bottom. So kudos to our teachers, because
in many statistics, our children are at the bottom.
In performance? No, they're not.
Absolutely. The only
They're
thing
right in
we're
the middle of the pack. And we'd probably be higher if we didn't have a large number
like
of
SAT
people who don't have English as a first language, which makes their scores lower.
Okay,
what you're
we're
saying.
We're going to have a chance to get into education in just a moment, but I want to ask another question about a specific issue that we've got a voter asking about related to the economy. When we talk about the cost of housing, something that can come up is the short-term rental industry. So I want to ask both of you, and we'll start with Mr. Duggar on this one. Where do you stand on Arizona's current legislation that does not allow municipalities to regulate short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods? Do you think that Airbnbs and in some cases, multi-occupancy Airbnbs should be allowed to operate in residentially zoned neighborhoods?
I honestly don't really have a problem with that. I don't see why that would be an issue for people to do this. Problem is Airbnb is very expensive and there's a lot of risk for the owners. You're talking about Band-Aids on a much larger situation. Until we curtail inflation by increasing interest rates, unfortunately, that will also hurt people's housing prices. But the way you combat that is by bringing in new revenue and people that can afford higher prices for houses. So it's a balancing act. If we're going to get better housing for people, we need to expand our housing significantly. And we need to get inflation under control as best we can from internally. And there are solutions. It doesn't cost that much to build PDUs and things like that.
Okay, but the question of local control over the short-term rental industry, do you think municipalities should have the right, which they currently don't, to put regulations on Airbnb and other short-term rentals?
I don't know. I don't believe in that kind of a regulation. That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I've got Airbnbs. I mean, I use them all the time. Why should it be regulated? I mean,
okay, Mr. Kavanaugh, what do you think about
traditionally through zoning, municipalities had the right to regulate what I consider to be decentralized horizontal hotels in residential neighborhoods. And about 6 or 7 years ago, the bill went through to preempt local control of these rentals. Everybody drank the Kool-Aid to the legislature. Democrats loved it because, the people make a little extra cash renting out a room. Republicans loved it because it was deregulation. The vote in the Senate was 29 in favor of removing the power of municipalities to control and 1 against. I was the one against. And I was the one against because I knew that municipalities do not have the resources, the personnel to adequately police these short-term rentals. And I knew it would be a disaster. And it was a disaster. And you have party houses, you have people's whose homes and investments are totally disrupted by 5 or 6 guys at a golf outing, drinking and yelling and shouting to all hours of the night, buses pulling up for events. It was a total disaster. I was able to ban the strict party houses, but it still causes tremendous problems. And who does it cause problems to? Our district. You have overproliferation of these short-term rentals in districts where people want to be, tourist areas. So Fountain Hills, Scottsdale, North Phoenix, our district is disproportionately harmed by these rentals. And some are even worse. Sedona, something like 20% of Sedona's housing stock is now hotel short-term rentals, making it hard for teachers and other people to even live in the city. So I supported the recent giving of some more powers to municipalities, but we never should have taken that away from them. That's a commercial business. It has no business in a residential neighborhood. And I'll continue to fight to protect people in their best investment, their home, and to keep it peaceful and their property values up.
Okay.
That is absolutely the wrong viewpoint. People should be allowed to use their investments how they choose. They have insurance to cover damage.
It's a residential neighborhood. If you want to own a hotel, go into a commercial neighborhood.
It's not a hotel. People want to rent a place, short-term, long-term, in a residential neighborhood, so they're not sitting in a hotel.
Different people every week pull in next to your house. You don't know who they are. Some of them party all night and make noise. It's destroying our community. I will protect our community.
That's not protecting the community. You're literally taking away people's investment opportunities.
Depends on who you consider community.
Okay.
I consider my constituents my community, not
Oh yeah, your constituents are the ones that own the property.
I think we've heard the viewpoints. So thank you both. I want to move on to.
This is one of the nonpartisan issues I spoke about.
Okay.
Well, yeah, everybody disagrees with you.
Okay.
So I'm with that group of people that disagree with you because.
All right, Mr. Duggar, please. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about education, which I know is something that both of you want to speak about. It's a perennial issue in our state. The first thing I want to ask is, do you think our public schools are adequately funded, and are universal school vouchers a good use of state education dollars? And first, we'll go to Mr. Kavanaugh with this one.
Yeah, I think with the recent increases, we've got funding up to a pretty good level. I think we could use a little bit more, but overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the substantial increases that we've given. And again, a lot of it was a restoration of drastic cuts during the Great Recession. And I'm glad that we're able to restore them. And of course, I am a supporter of vouchers. I supported the charter school system because it gives parents choice. And I also support the voucher system because it gives parents choice. Because when you give parents choice, you get greater competition, and competition makes everybody a little bit sharper. In fact, there were some studies by, I think it was Pew or the Rand Institute, I forget which one, that when charter schools first came in and the district schools were saying, this is terrible, 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 that actually the scores of students in public schools near the charter schools and the satisfaction levels of parents and surveys went up because the district school said, wow, we have to compete now, so we better get our act together and be really good. And I think you'll see the same effect with the vouchers. So yeah, I'm supportive of both. I think parents can make the best choices to where their child goes to school.
Okay, Mr. Duggar, what do you think? Is there enough funding for public education in the state right now, and are universal vouchers a good use of our state money?
He just literally contradicted himself in his own sentence. Those vouchers come out of the public school money. They are going to rich people. 76% are already paying for the private schools. This is a tax cut for the rich, and that money comes out of the public school education fund, and it affects public schools and charter schools. You're literally taking away their money, which we already spend the lowest in the country. And why do you think our teachers are going to Texas? Because Texas spends $12,000 a student. Alaska spends $17,000. We spend $8,000, and we're one of the wealthiest states by GDP. It's insane that we are being so short-sighted. This is not a Republican thing. This is not a Democrat thing. This is an Arizona legislature thing. Our Arizona legislature does not understand education at all. They literally do not. And a guy who's a teacher, who has been a teacher, for shame, our teachers are going to Texas. Why? Because they get better pay. I mean, you are taking a budget of $8,000 per student. Now, how much is going to go to the public school kids? $7,000 a student. You're going to have us below Alabama, Mississippi, and this is a wealthy state. This is absolute nonsense. And this is exactly why we don't get the big tech companies coming here. This is my industry. And I'm like, why does Intel have their main shop here? Well, they just have their manufacturing stuff here. What about American Express? Well, they have their call centers here. What about Verizon and all these companies? Well, they have their data centers here. Why don't they have the high-paying jobs here? Because they don't want their kids going to schools with one of the worst education systems. And a
Okay.
lot of these charter schools, a lot of them, they weed out the kids. I got a friend, his kid's been in basis for 5 years. Kid's 22. All right. They really are trying to get rid of him, but his parents won't let him leave until he graduates. These charter schools, they can make your life hard. Now, I do like a lot of these charter schools, but the thing is, public schools need more funding. Teachers
Okay.
have classrooms, 50
Okay.
to 60
Thank you.
kids. How do you handle that? And these vouchers disproportionately help the rich. This is a tax cut for the rich, and there is no way to hide from that fact.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to have vouchers, increase the budget for schools and have a separate budget for vouchers. Then I don't care. Just don't take away any more money from public schools.
Okay, I want to move on to another education.
Well, I'd like to address that spending thing,
Sure.
please.
Sure.
Sure.
just-
And by the way, we do, it is separately funded. We've expanded vouchers and we've increased K-12 spending. So we are doing that. But if I understand Mr. Duggar, he basically said Arizona's $8,000 per student a year is inadequate and he's happier with Texas's $12,000, right? Which is what he said. Well, Mr. Duggar doesn't know what the finances are. Based on the budget we just passed, in 2023, Arizona students will be getting per pupil $12,600, not $8,000, $12,600 because of the education increases that the Republican-led legislature and Governor Ducey enacted.
For vouchers.
12,600. Now, in
For
addition,
vouchers.
you can actually, with vouchers, in addition, you can also add $900 to that for over a 4-year period, because the schools also got $4 billion in federal money between 2020 and up till 2024. So in actuality, for the next 2 years, it's not 8,000, it's not 12,600, which is state money and local money. There's actually over 13,000. So we have already surpassed what you said was adequate funding, which was
For
Texas.
public.
We're there, and you didn't even know we were there, Mr.
Oh,
Duggar.
I'm well aware
You
that
can't
you added
besmirch Arizona's education system and tell people around the
Yeah.
country that we don't fund it when we're giving 50% more than you think we're giving.
No, you
You gotta get
created
the facts.
vouchers.
Okay, so something
It's
that's
a
gonna
voucher
be-
thing.
something that's going to arrive. in
Subtract
the next-
vouchers from it and tell me what the number
Mr.
is.
Duggar, please. Something that's going to arrive in the next next legislative session, or potentially sooner. There seems to be a slim possibility of a special session on this, is the aggregate expenditure limit. There has been a big increase in public education spending in the budget that was passed this year, but without raising the aggregate expenditure limit, many public schools won't be able to access that money. So my question, and on this one, we'll go to Mr. Duggar first, is what should be done about the aggregate expenditure limit this coming year and moving forward farther into the future?
So having limits on education, capping them the way they are with a constitutional amendment is absolutely insane. I'm pretty sure we're one of the very few states that has that, if the only one. The way you increase the amount of people that come to this state and increase revenue is by increasing spending on education. This has been proven in every state. And for some reason, I'll have to look at his numbers and subtract the voucher system from what it is, but I just don't believe it. It's just not true. Every teacher I meet with, everybody is saying the exact same thing. So whatever he's telling you, this is absolutely not true. There should be no cap on education. Education should be looked at as an investment in our kids. And the underserved areas, they don't get any of these voucher systems. I've been watching the debates from the Republicans in the remote areas. They do not support the voucher system. They're like, we can't use it. We don't have private schools. We don't have these fancy private schools around. And so this is, again, when you invest in education, you bring in the big companies. Private industry people want to have a landing spot where there's an educated population that can take these high-paying jobs. We don't have that. We don't have
All right,
that
I'm
at
hearing
all.
from Mr. Duggar, it sounds like you're saying you would support permanently removing the expenditure limit. Mr.
I can't believe that we even have one. I literally
What do you think? What do you think about raising it next year or on a permanent basis?
Well, let me first say to Mr. Duggar that the path to being elected to office is not to call the people insane.
The people? I'm talking about the legislature.
This expenditure limit was voted into law by the voters, by the people. They're the ones you called insane for instituting the expenditure cap. Now, they did put in the ability of a legislature to override.
And then what about Proposition 208?
Please
where they voted it down?
Give him a chance. Give him a chance to speak. You can respond afterwards. Okay.
Yeah, but he's talking about something that happened 40 years ago, before people even were raised.
That's fine. You're welcome to respond to this, please, Mr. Kavanaugh.
Yeah. Now, they did put in a provision that the legislature could temporarily override it, and I have voted to override it in the past. But the problem we have is that the education community, and I believe they've seen polling that a vote to end the cap would fail at the ballot box, has not taken it to the ballot box as they should. So I'm very hesitant, having already overridden it. I'm getting a little hesitant, quite frankly, to keep overriding what the voters voted for when the education community doesn't want to go to the ballot and take care of the issue. They have no problem spending money going to the ballot to kill the voucher program, yet they don't want to defend they don't want to get rid of the spending cap that way. So I voted.
What was Proposition 208
I'll see what
then?
happens down the road.
Okay, well, let me ask a follow-up question to you, Mr. Kavanaugh. I mean, what good does increasing our budget for education do if there's going to be a cap in place that effectively prevents schools from spending?
As I said, I previously voted to override the cap, but it's not supposed to be something, you're not supposed to just keep spitting in the face of the voters who imposed a cap based upon inflation and student population. So I may do it again, I don't know, but how often do these people want to avoid going back to the voters who put it in and letting them make the decision? They want to give us the dirty work of keep having to override what the voters wanted. I'm uncomfortable doing that. So I'll see what happens.
Mr. Duggar, Mr. Kavanaugh says this is something that
40 years ago.
This should be done through a ballot initiative. What do you think about that?
The population of Arizona is completely different than what it was 40 years ago. You cannot compare the populations. And Proposition 208 was struck down by your party. That was the will of the people. Over 50% of the voters voted for it, and you struck it down. Explain that to me.
So if I may respond. So because the voters imposed this 40 years ago, it's expired because 40 years, you can't have a law for 40 years. Roe v. Wade was 50 years ago. Do you believe that was properly expired by the Supreme Court?
It's not a law.
Or do you only apply
Roe v. Wade is not
to things that you?
This is Civics 101. The Roe v. Wade was a decision. It was not a law.
Okay, we're gonna get to this extremely important issue.
Okay.
In a moment. But anything else on education before we move on?
Well, I would just say, look, that means that the education community's had 40 years to get rid of it, and they haven't.
They have. You guys just overturned it.
What are you talking about? No, I'm talking about the expenditure limit.
Okay, so that was implicit in Proposition 208. The fact that you decided it wasn't.
The court said. That's not what the court said.
The court that's been loaded by Ducey, putting
conspiracy theory now. We conspired to
the same thing Republicans said the Democrats were going to do. They've done themselves at the state level. They care nothing about the law. I'm
not going to go down the conspiracy theory road with you.
It's not conspiracy theory if it's really happening.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. I want to talk about our election system here in Arizona. There were a lot of efforts to change Arizona's elections laws in this legislative session in 2022. Some passed, but a lot of others didn't. And it looks like some of those could be back on the table in our session next year. So my question first to Mr. Kavanaugh with this one is, what do you think are the challenges that the state legislature needs to address with respect to voting? And following that, what kind of changes would you support?
I think there is a tremendous distrust and apprehension on the part of many of the population about the integrity of our election system. And you hear a lot of reports, sometimes you hear founded things. So I think people want to feel that the system is more secure. We passed a lot of election bills. A lot of them are signed into law. I passed a few election bills that actually passed with bipartisan support, because we discovered that there were things that should have been done that weren't done. I mean, somebody came up to me and said, hey, when I'm voting, they have all these data ports in the machines that are unlocked. Anybody could put a thumb drive in and put stuff in or take stuff out. I said, that's crazy. So I passed a law that they all have to have locks on those ports. And it was bipartisan, everybody voted for it, it was passed. Somebody complained that when they go to the polling place and they fill their ballot out in the privacy of a little booth, they have to stand online and everybody can see their ballot. So I passed a law that people need to get privacy folders. Somebody said they put their ballot in the machine and the machine rejected it and a light came on. And the person said, oh, don't worry about it, just hit this button and put it in again. And they did that. They later found out that it was rejected and the light came on because there was a problem with their ballot. They voted for too many people on one ballot or that some mark was wrong. They were supposed to be told there's a problem, you can correct it. But instead, the election workers just said, throw it in, which means that ballot was counted, but without that problematic office being part of the count. So I passed a law that you have to inform people of what's happening. So we did a lot of, we had a great, Senator Gentry Reader had a fantastic bill that didn't deregister people, but they said, if after 2 years you don't vote in a major election, then we're going to send you a card to say, are you still there? And if you don't reply, and we have a phone number or an email, we will again try to reach you to see if you're still there. And only then if you don't reply, we take you off the mailing list for the early ballot. We don't deregister you, but we don't want to send ballots to addresses where people are dead or moved. Okay. That was an excellent bill. And that's a lot of the stuff that we did.
All right, Mr. Duggar, Mr. Kavanaugh says that Arizonans doubt the integrity of the election system in the state. Do you think that's the challenge the legislature needs to address with respect to that?
Of course they doubt it. You've got people talking heads on TV saying that the vote was stolen, the vote was stolen, the vote was stolen after one audit after another, including a completely partisan check by cyber ninjas. You get the same result. We are spending so much time on minutia things and voting just because some of these big news, quote unquote, news shows want to make prime cuts in this stuff. And we've got an ex-president who has decided that, hey, this is how I can make a lot of money. He's gotten hundreds of millions of dollars in donations. This kind of stuff has to stop. Now, with respect to a USB drive, USB drives are locked out of Dominion machines. Now, considering that I work on these machines and none of you have, I think I have a little bit more expertise than anyone there in the Senate. Now, they always lock those ports. Those ports are locked. And even if you could plug,
now my bill is there, they will. People saw unopened ports.
But I don't think you understand what an open port means. Just describe to me what an open port. Sure, you can stick it in. The port is inactive. These ports are inactive. You can stick whatever you want in there. You can stick a banana in there. It's not. So I mentioned 4 bills. I mentioned 3 other bills. Which of those are minutia bills that aren't worthy of consideration? The privacy bill you don't like, telling people about the light you don't like, removing people after numerous attempts to find out if they're still there from the mailing list. Are they all minutia bills that are no good? Well, I don't see any kind of evidence of any kind of voter fraud with mail-in ballots. In fact, why would you send ballots? Very few cases. Why would you handle a problem that is not a problem? It's a problem when it's a problem when you mail a ballot to somebody who's moved or is dead, because somebody may get that ballot and they may vote with it. And if it's a family member, they have access to. Show me. Explain to me your acumen and how these ballots are validated, because I don't think you understand how mail-in ballots are validated. I know how they're validated. They're validated by looking at signatures on record. Correct. And it's totally subjective and arbitrary as to how much variation you allow before you reject a signature and try to check it by phone. And amazingly, the number of rejected ballots went down dramatically when Mr. Fontes was the recorder. Interesting. So you don't understand how ballots work. The way the ballot system works is people that are trained in signatures, they look. If there's a discrepancy or variance, it goes to a bipartisan review. 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. They decide together whether or not this is a valid signature. That's how it works. You've been in this office for how many years and you don't
Then
know
why, then why?
you don't even know how the ballots work.
Then
and you're
why
writing
did the
bills on
rejection
ballots.
rate dramatically drop when Mr. Democrat Fontes was the recorder? If everything was being done scientifically, there should have only been minimal variation in the acceptance
Could it be
rejection
perhaps
rate.
he had a
It
more
was
efficient
dramatic,
staff than the Republicans?
dramatic.
Could it be that he had a more efficient staff that was better trained?
Oh,
Have you considered that? So
Okay,
you have no
let's move
evidence.
on.
You are making wild accusations with
I'm not.
absolutely no evidence.
All I
Okay.
said was,
Thanks.
well,
Give me a count on how many
I wanna avoid-
mail-in ballots there were. How
Please,
many-
I
how
want to
many
avoid,
mail-in
I want to
ballots,
avoid
mail-in ballots?
retracing the same ground over and over, but
Yeah.
let's get to a question that I think is underlying some of the discussion here. So to both of you, we'll go to Mr. Duggars first. Do you think there was fraud in the 2020 election?
Well, I mean, that's, there's fraud in every single election. Was there any kind of widespread fraud? Absolutely not. You want to
Okay,
look at fraud?
Mr. Kavanaugh,
Yeah.
widespread fraud in the 2020 election.
I agree that there was fraud. I don't know the extent of the fraud. Many of the bills that we've introduced will attempt to give us more accountability to have a better chance of reducing fraud.
How?
Sometimes the push coming from legislators to increase what they say is increasing the security of Arizona's election is pushed by people who have cast doubt on the validity of Arizona's election system. Does that concern
Well,
you?
you know, I mean,
in any way?
which bill, I mean, removing people who were dead or moved from the early voting list, I don't see a problem with that. All the Democrats
Who sees a
opposed to it.
problem with that? Did I say let's keep dead people on the ballot?
Well, then why do you object to sending out letters to see if people are still there and following up with emails or phone calls if there's no reply, and only then removing them from the?
Because the state actually keeps track of who's dead and they're removed from the voting
Do you
list.
object to sending the letters to say you haven't voted in 2 years? Are you still there? Do you object to that?
I object to that, yes.
Well,
You
what can
don't
I
need-
say? I don't.
You don't need to ask them. You can find out whether they have moved or died.
No, you can't.
How? Are you kidding me? You don't think we have the records on who died? How do you think?
All over the 50 states to see if
That's
somebody
how we
was
clear
there?
the list. We
Huh?
clear the list and we do not send ballots to dead people.
You do.
No,
I
we
know
don't.
people, constituents came to me and said, my mother-in-law died 3 years ago. There are still ballots going there.
Okay, you're talking about, again, a minutia, small amount. And nobody can use that ballot.
And what's the big deal? What is the big deal with removing dead people and people who moved who we don't know about? Why
I don't
is
have
that
a problem with
threat
that.
to election integrity?
I don't have a problem with that.
You said you did a minute ago.
No, I have a problem with you removing people after 2 years.
We're not removing them after 2 years.
So what
Every
is
2
your
years,
threshold?
we send them a letter. If they don't respond and we have an email or a phone, we email or phone them. And only then do we simply take them off the mailing list. They are still registered and they can still go to a polling place.
So I
object
agree
to
with
that?
all that.
Do you object to
Here's
that?
what I'm trying to say.
Do you object to that?
Here's
You
what I'm
can't
trying to say.
Because he objects to
Of
it.
course I can.
But you
I
object to
don't
it.
object to it. I do not object to it. What I object to is
Okay,
that
then we
waste
agree.
we
We should
waste-
leave on the agreement.
that. You'd love that, wouldn't you? The real problem here is we're spending hundreds of bills on voting restrictions and ignoring real problems in Arizona. And you
But
have
the big bill that you
absolutely
mentioned.
Okay,
Whoa, 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 I
Mr.
didn't
Duggar,
finish.
let's,
have
Mr. Duggar, tell us
absolutely no
what
evidence that
do
this
you
is a
think
problem.
are?
Why do you
This
create
is
this-
ignoring real problems. What are the problems that you, as a legislator, would address with respect to the election system?
Well, I already mentioned them. I mean, we're talking.
No, sorry. This is for Mr. Duggar. I'm saying if you're saying
I'm
that this
losing
is
track.
ignoring the
We're
real
talking over
problem,
Each other.
if you're saying this is ignoring the real problems, what do you see as the challenges the legislature needs to address?
Water, the schools.
Okay, not the elections.
Economy.
You don't think that's
Well,
not what it's priority.
I'm an evidence-based person. Until someone shows me any kind of significant evidence, why are we spending and wasting, what is it, 200 bills? How much money did that cost the taxpayer without any evidence? All right.
200 bills.
They ran their audit with cyber ninjas.
200
Cyber
bills didn't
ninjas got
become
more
law.
votes for Biden. Okay, that proved beyond any doubt, even after the 3 audits, that this election was secure. You first must show that there's a problem before you create 200 bills legislating all kinds of random stuff based on innuendo that comes right out of talking heads that make profit off of it.
200 bills did not go through the system. That's ridiculous. That's
How many?
fabricated. That's,
Okay,
that's
okay.
like we didn't do 200 bills. And the big bill which you claimed was horrible about overriding the Electoral College, that bill was stopped by the Republican legislature. That didn't go anywhere. So
Yeah,
you're even attacking us for doing things that we didn't do. You have to
Okay,
get that
okay.
straight. It's just like education.
that bill is on
You were
record
off by
right now.
50%.
Are you telling me that every single person that has been reporting this is lying and that
Reporting
you're
what?
correct?
Reporting
This
what?
bill is already on record right now.
What bill?
That they can
Turning the
send their own
electors.
electors.
It wasn't even heard.
It already went up to the Supreme Court.
I don't know what you're talking about. We did not pass a bill
Exactly.
that allows the
Exactly.
legislature to overturn the Electoral College of Arizona. It never happened.
Yes, it did.
This is,
Okay,
everybody check and then vote Kavanaugh, because this
Okay.
individual is totally off.
okay, I think, yeah, we can move on to the next issue here. You guys have also both spoken about this. The Supreme Court earlier this year pushed back regulation of abortion to the states. So I want to ask you both, and we'll start with, I believe we're going to Mr. Kavanaugh first on this one. What is your stance on abortion, and what role do you think the Arizona legislature should play in regulating abortion access in this state?
Sure. Well, the second part of the question, what role should the legislature play, was recently decided by the Supreme Court. The legislature determines one way or the other. So get the second part out real quick. Before I answer the abortion question, I think it's necessary to preface that a lot of the acrimony and that surrounds this issue is because neither side understands the other's position. Let me explain my position as being pro-life. I honestly and sincerely and unequivocally believe that the unborn child is a human being. So therefore, killing that unborn child, I believe, is murder. I could not ethically and morally condone that. Believing it's a human being would not allow me to say you can kill it here, there, or whatever, right? The only exception I make is for the life of the mother, because then there's a kind of a balancing right there. Now, I don't call people who are pro-choice, baby killers and baby murderers. I sincerely believe that almost every one of them, right, doesn't think the fetus is a human being. If they thought the fetus was a human being and they were okay with killing it, they would be horrible people. And I do not think they're horrible people. I do not believe that they think that that the fetus, the unborn, is a human being. I do. So respect me. Don't think that I, as an ethical person, could ever support a law that would allow the killing of an innocent human being like that. And by the same token, and I assume Mr. Duggar is pro-choice, I'm not going to assume that he thinks that the fetus is a human being and he wants to kill it, allow its killing for convenience or whatever. So that's where I'm at on abortion.
Okay, Mr. Duggar, where do you stand on this?
Well, I can list all the things that I think that men should have to do with women's choices for their own body. That's it. I'm done with the list.
Okay, I would.
This is a choice between. Excuse me, you had your.
You said you were done.
I was done with my list.
Let's let Mr. Duggar continue.
No, I'm fine. He said he was done and he paused. I waited.
Yeah, you didn't get the. I was trying to interject.
Every time you finish, go like this, so I know what you're doing.
So, well, I'm not. I don't want to kill anybody or cut anybody off. All right, let's just enjoy the joke for a second, okay? So listen, my wife is a physician and my sister is a nurse practitioner. These are decisions that often have to do with problems with the fetus, problems with the baby has no brain in the third term. All this stuff there are so many reasons why people have abortions. And to actually try to say, we're going to legislate what is right and what is wrong, when you are not a physician and you do not know what all the issues are, what are you going to create a list of what's right and what's wrong? No. And you said over and over again, I believe it's a human being. Why should your belief system trump someone else's? That doesn't make any sense. Now you're saying that your First Amendment is allowed to trump someone else's First Amendment right to what they believe. And that's not. Republicans used to be pro-choice too.
Let me change that.
And our district is 73% pro-choice. Republicans in this district are pro-choice. You are voting against your own district.
How
I
far-
represent the
Okay,
district.
let's go
You
back
do
to
not.
Mr. Kavanaugh. Mr. Kavanaugh, can you tell us, I mean, I would like to hear your response to his question, should
Yeah.
your belief trump someone else's, but also can you clarify, I mean, you mentioned that in the general case, you think that abortion should not be permitted, but you mentioned one exception, which is when the life of the mother is at risk.
Correct.
You know, other regulatory schema include exceptions for rape and incest. Do you not think that those should be available? Do you think that it should be permitted up to a certain stage of the pregnancy?
It's a very emotional question, obviously. And in a sense, we debate around the edges when we talk about the cases that are very rare. But from my position, it's very simple. I believe the unborn is a human being, and it's an innocent human being. It had nothing to do with the rape or the incest. So I don't see why this innocent human being should be killed.
But
Now,
should
I would be interested
your-
in Mr. Duggar's answer to the flip side of the fringe case. What about a last trimester abortion merely because the woman changed her mind about having a child? Would he support?
Okay, we'll get to that in just a
Okay.
moment. But again, why should your
Third
belief,
trimester.
sincere as I have no doubt that it is, be made law that regulates the choices that someone else can make with their body?
That's how all laws are made. People have an opinion on whether marijuana is good or bad, or drugs are good or bad, or capital punishment is good or bad, or free healthcare is good. Everybody bases it on their belief. So there's nothing wrong about, I mean, everything we do is based upon our belief. So
Okay.
yeah, that's not an issue.
Okay, Mr. Duggar, what do you think about that? And also, do you think there are any appropriate restrictions on abortion, for instance, in the third trimester of a pregnancy?
Legislation on abortion is against the First Amendment, regardless of what the Federalist Supreme Court justices did. They literally have a platform that we are going to overturn any kind of progressive rulings dating back to the 60s. And I think if you count them, all the different things that are about to be knocked off, it's all the progression in rights of individual rights are all going to be torn down. We cannot let this stand. This is not a legislation issue. This is a personal privacy issue. It is not for me to tell people what trimester, when it's a human, when it's not a human, when the soul enters the body, like in the Bible, it says in Genesis, God breathed life into Adam and he had a soul. So for thousands of years, people thought it was once the baby was born, it had a soul. And if you read the Bible, like I have many, many times, you won't see any kind of instances in there talking about abortion being illegal. This is dogma that's been added since the 1850s to various religions. Abortions have been around since 1550 BCE recorded. This has been a thing that's been going on for ages. But none of that matters. We do not have the right to decide for women what happens to their body. We don't have universal health care. We're living in a massive inflation problem. There's all kinds of reasons that could be economical. We don't have paid leave, mandatory paid leave like other countries. We have nothing to support these women who may have been raped. And you think that's okay? This person that was raped on the street now has to go without insurance through carry this baby to term, and then has to somehow try to afford it. And where's the money for Republicans to help take care of these babies? Where's the shelter money? Where's your proposal for universal health care so that they can actually carry these babies to term without going bankrupt? Where is it?
Well,
You got the cart,
let me know when
the
I can
horse,
speak.
Okay, let's
everything.
give him a chance to reply.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say that my opposition to abortion, except to save life of the mother, is not based on religion. I am Catholic, but I arrived at my position on abortion when I saw pictures of the developing fetus. They're human beings. They're little human beings. It's even early on, they have fingers and faces. It's horrible to me to think of somebody killing under that circumstance. I also find it shocking that Mr. Duggar would allow a 8-month abortion of a child that's perfectly healthy just because the woman decided she didn't want it. That's pretty
I didn't
shocking.
say that.
You want to talk
I
about?
didn't say that.
You
I
said,
said it's none of my business to legislate that.
yeah, so you would allow it.
No, it is. I am not going to legislate anything that that is the women's choice.
So what does that mean? So that means you allow it. You can't run from your position, as horrible as it is.
I am not
abortion
allowing it or disallowing it.
Yes, you are. If you,
Again,
all right, well, right now it's not allowed in Arizona law. So when you get to the legislature, you won't vote if there's a move to change that law?
oh, I
You
will.
will make a decision?
I'll vote for whatever is best for women.
Oh, that's
And
a
I've
good
got
dodge.
the support of all the women's
Are you
groups.
talking about women fetuses too, who would be killed? What's best
So-
for them? There could be a female in that. There could be a female in that uterus developing.
Listen, I'm not.
What about the
I'm not
right
gonna,
of that woman?
I'm not going to argue science with people that don't use
Okay.
science for their
All right.
background. You literally
I
didn't
think
use
we've,
any
I think
science
we've
for
covered
balance,
the
and now you
different
want to bring
policy
science
positions
into the
here.
fact with
Okay.
I see an ultrasound. Is there any brain activity in the baby yet?
Yeah.
You know?
They even
How
feel
do you-
pain at 8 months. At 8 months,
at 8
they
months.
could be. At 8 months, they could be born. At 7 months, they can be born and live
My personal opinion is
without
doesn't sound-
extra care.
my personal opinion is I don't like that. I don't like, nobody likes
Well,
abortion.
that's
I don't
little
like
comfort to
abortion
the
at all.
dead fetus.
It is not my right to decide what other people
Okay.
do with their body.
Okay, okay. Thank you both.
Period.
Thank you both.
Do I like it?
You-
No.
You believe
Nobody
in
likes
legalizing?
abortion. You
You
make it
believe in
seem like
legalized heroin
Democrats
since it's not you?
want to have baby killing machines. That is
Would you
not what's
legalize-
going on.
Would you legalize heroin because you don't have a right to tell people what to do with their bodies?
I believe that if what they do hurts other citizens,
Doesn't?
which heroin
They-
does,
Yeah.
heroin does.
How does heroin hurt somebody?
Okay.
If you
I think-
legalize
I think
heroin?
we've-
I thought
I
you
think
were the
we're straight
police
off
guy.
topic.
You already
Please,
know.
please.
You already know the answer to that question. so
Please.
Oh, yeah.
Please, let's
You
move
don't
on.
believe in heroin legalization, but that's opposed to your previous statement that you don't think you have the right to tell people what to do with their body. You're being inconsistent.
No, I'm not. That's complete consistency. You have the right to do whatever you want to your own body as long as you're not hurting somebody else.
Well, if there's somebody else in abortion, is the fetus.
You think that your belief is that fetus is alive, whatever, and
At
you know
7
what?
months, if it was born, it would be alive. At 7 months, it would leave and it would go into a crib instead of an ICU
so-
unit.
Please,
I
Mr.
will
Duggar, Mr.
support-
Kavanaugh, let's
Wait, I
move
think
on.
I can agree. I
We've
can agree
covered
with you
all
on
of the
that one.
policy stances
if the
here.
fetus is a viable fetus, if the baby
Please,
is a
Mr.
viable,
Duggar,
I do
we're moving
believe
on.
that
Okay,
you should not be
thank
able to
you.
abortion.
All right,
I agree with
we're going to
you.
move on to
We're
the
coming
final
together.
subject.
Just keep
That's
talking.
enough.
I
We're
agree
moving
with
on.
that.
The final subject this evening,
we're
before we
agreeing.
get into the opening statements, is going to be some of the water issues facing the state. Obviously, Arizona is facing a water shortage. This year, the legislature set aside more than $1 billion to, among other things, go out and find new water sources for the state. Our governor wants that to go towards building a desalination plant, potentially in Mexico. So my question first for Mr. Duggars, is that desalination plant a good idea? Do you think the state should be doing other things to find new water sources or conserve the water that we have as well?
It's an absolutely abhorrent idea. It's not as bad as his idea of building a pipeline to the Mississippi that would take 30 years. But desalination plants are incredibly expensive. The transportation of the water is incredibly expensive. And here's what the real problem is. Our groundwater is not being regulated at all. And, you know, I know people don't want to regulate, but when we sell off our land and lease it out to foreign governments that are enemies of our state, and they grow alfalfa and completely drain our aquifer, there is something really dirty going on. Right now, they gave Saudi Arabia a deal. Instead of the $100 an acre, they are only charging them $50 an acre. $50 an acre to grow alfalfa. And they have the money to drill much deeper than our farmers. Our farmers have no options at this point. Our farmers are all going to be going under soon because we have been completely irresponsible with who we let use our land and what kind of crops we grow here. You can't grow alfalfa. It's ridiculous. And $4 million a year of water is being pulled out just by Saudi Arabia right now. And they're not paying for that. They're getting it for free. And this is all because of Ducey and his policy of letting whoever is hit. I don't even understand it. It makes no sense. I think John would agree with me that we should not let foreign governments especially enemies of the state, to take away our water. So that step one, control the water problem. Step two, convert these fallow fields to solar and lease out this land from the farmers so they don't lose all of their property. They don't lose all of their investments, and start doing common sense crops that make sense with the changing climate. There are a million studies. There are solutions to this. A desalination plant, this is pie in the sky. The technology is not affordable yet. The reason that it does work in some of these other countries that are in like Saudi Arabia, they're building these things. The water's right there. We're a landlocked state, which is why we have to use Mexico. So all of a sudden, we want to use Mexico? I mean, that makes no sense. And this is a short-term fix for a long-term problem. We have to be able to be malleable. And right now, we're being reactive. We should have been proactive about this 10 years ago. But because climate change deniers kept saying, oh, it's not man-made, it's not man-made. Oh my God, now the whole world is burning down with forest fires. Oh, maybe there is something going on here. And now we're running out of water. Oh, wow, I think we have to. So it's this reactive politics. Progressive means you are looking forward. It doesn't mean you're a screaming heart liberal. It means you're looking to be proactive, not reactive. We got to get proactive people into the Senate.
Mr. Kavanaugh, there's an idea of a desalination plant. What do you think about that? What else should the state be doing to augment water supplies or conserve what we've got?
Yeah, I don't support desalination for a number of reasons. I agree with Mr. Duggar, it's just way too expensive. The second problem is that even the people who support it concede that it's going to take 10 years to build. I mean, what good is something 10 years down the road?
Exactly.
And in addition, it's going to be in Mexico, in a foreign country, which greatly reduces the control that we have over it. So that's not a good idea.
Wait, now I want to vote for you.
About the Mississippi water, and it's actually not the Mississippi. They would intercept it from the Missouri River before the Mississippi. But either way, I think that's totally unrealistic to run a pipeline that far. And I don't even know if you can do eminent domain in other states. So, you know, but so I don't even know if that's ever a serious plan. So where does that leave us? You know, a couple small projects. There's talk about paying for a wastewater to drinking water in San Diego and then taking their share of the Colorado River. That's like a drop in the bucket. I think the bottom line is you're not going to really get any new water sources. They're just not there to get. And that means that we probably have to use our money on conservation methods. Now, let's be realistic as to who's using the water, right? 74% of the water in Arizona is used for agriculture. And that's where you have to take your savings. And I think one way you can do it would be to conservation, drip irrigation. We sent some people over to Israel and they're really good with drip irrigation. You can save a tremendous amount of water with drip irrigation. Concerning the Saudi farm with the alfalfa, I've actually communicated with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and I'm requesting that the Auditor General do a audit of the contract that the State Land Department did with that company on that farm, which is on state trust land, which is over an aquifer that's supposed to be a reserve for other areas. The allegation is that it was a super sweetheart deal. The rent of the land is below, and there's no requirement for water metering. There's no charging for the water. So I'm going to have the Auditor General, you know, put some light on that to see where it's at. I'll probably also sponsor legislation to state that if it's state land, we can, and we lease it out for agriculture, we cannot do water intense crops like pecans and cotton and alfalfa, because it's just ridiculous to do super water intensive crops. But I think we're just going to have to, I mean, agriculture is going to take most of the hit here, quite frankly. Other dreams that are coming nowhere, you know, people talk about, you know, covering the canals. I mean, that, again, that's something which is economically ridiculous. Somebody said, oh, put solar panels on top of the canals. Yeah, I talked SRP. The problem is you can't generate electricity with solar in the middle of nowhere when there's no place to take it to. So that becomes ridiculous also. So I think you're going to have to see a lot of conservation. I think you can invest money in public water supply infrastructure in older systems like Phoenix, which leak water like sieves, and get some savings there. But overall, we're just going to have to live with the reality of reduced water.
Okay, Mr. Kavanaugh, since you've have a lengthy term of service in the legislature, I want to ask you, you mentioned a desalination plant won't come for 10 years, so that doesn't address problems that we have now. But what needs to happen different in our lawmaking process so that we have solutions that address this problem at the speed that it's coming at us?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, the big thing is to spend the money on conservation, what have you. I think we also need to protect the aquifers that are being threatened, especially in Pinal County. I mean, this is not a partisan issue. This is a rural urban issue. So if it's rural, regardless of what party you're at, you're going to do everything you can to stop any restrictions on aquifer pumping, because then you're taking away water from your constituents. You're reducing the idea of developing new housing, which is economic growth and prosperity. So they are like totally opposed to any kind of restrictions on aquifer pumping until you wind up having fissures and people's aquifers go dry. But you have to put reasonable, you have to expand the active management areas to stop the crazy pumping of the aquifers and do the conservation.
Okay, and Mr. Duggar, to go back to you briefly, I think you were mentioning this earlier, but could you just say, do you support establishing additional active management areas? And on a broader, more broadly, what needs to happen differently at the legislature so that we can address this issue before it becomes even more dire?
Well, I would have liked to have seen this bill when we knew it was going to be a problem several years ago. But I agree with everything Mr. Kavanaugh said. He's dead on here. Both of us are fiscal conservatives. Both of us believe in conservation. Both of us believe in animal rights. The real difference between us is when it comes to the First Amendment, he has a different view than me. And that's one thing. But I think on most of this stuff, he and I can agree on a lot of things that would be good for the state. And that's the kind of thing I would bring with the legislature. I'm going to make sure that I work with people like John. We may fight over what's a baby and whatever, and what's not, and what should be. But when it comes down to what the finances and what is good for the state and what is going to help our economy, I think both of us would be able to work together very well. It's a shame that I'm actually running against him because, you know, I think having a person like me in the state that really understands finance and IT would really bring us into a new kind of progress.
You sounds like this sounds like a closing statement, which we will get to in a minute. But can you direct?
Oh yeah, no, it's not.
The active.
I was just saying, I liked his response.
Question.
I liked his response. It's perfect. It's what I agree with. You know, the only thing I would do differently right now is I think we should immediately shut off Saudi Arabia. Immediately stop that lease. And if they want to sue us, they can sue us. We got to. They're pulling water. They've got all these extremely deep wells now. As they run out of water from the aquifer, they drill nothing. All this stuff, any foreign entity that is drilling and taking our water, this should be stopped immediately. This should be done by an executive order. I believe Doug Ducey should put through an executive order to absolutely cease and desist on this, because our farmers are going to go, they're going to lose their crops. They're going to lose all their livelihood when our backup water supply is being taken overseas.
Okay.
By the people responsible for 9/11. Let's not forget that.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to our closing statements, and we're going to do these in the reverse order from opening. So that means that we'll start with Mr. Kavanaugh and then go to Mr. Duggar. So, Mr. Kavanaugh, will you please start your closing statement?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm running for re-election to the Senate, even though I'm in the House. I previously served 4 years in the Senate. I've got a lot of experience in public policy as a town councilman and as a state legislator. And that experience comes in handy. And I also have a reputation of being somebody who's not afraid to tackle difficult issues. And I'm also a person who is very open to receiving requests and recommendations from everybody. I mean, constituents, interests, companies, individuals. If it's a good law, I do what I can to pass it. And I've been very successful. I actually had 30 bills signed into law by the governor this last session, which is the most of anybody in the House. I don't know if anybody beat me in the Senate, but I take public policy seriously. I research it, I study it, I try to write the law properly and pass good laws. And I think I've made Arizona a better place for the time that I've been there. And I would like to continue serving the people of Arizona by staying in the legislature and keeping my institutional knowledge there so that we don't wind up being run by, staff members who I respect and help me, and lobbyists.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. And Mr. Duggar, your closing statement.
Yeah, we have already 30 career politicians in the Senate. We have lots of career politicians. What we don't have is someone with 35 years of finance and information technology experience. We don't have somebody like me. And we don't have a person who's willing to go across the aisles on tough issues and negotiate them. And my background in science, I've got a science degree, and this is my focus. My focus is to make the Arizona people money with their money, to increase our GDP, and to bring in more and more people to this state, because our education system can be one of the best in the country. We could literally have the best education system in the country. We have a very, very nice sizable income. We had $5 billion in excess this year. And instead of actually using that to address problems like water or the education system, they put together a tax cut for the rich bill. I mean, the rich people, I know lots of rich people, they don't want any more tax cuts. I'm not sure where this idea comes from and that this trickle-down theory actually works, but it's been debunked for decades and decades. We need to stop this and start doing real common sense policymaking to make sure Arizona has a good future. How do we fight inflation? How do we do all this stuff? We do it through policy of growth. I am a big proponent in growth. Everybody else is a proponent, it seems, of do the same thing and reactive politics. You want someone who's proactive? I'm in there. You want someone who believes in your First Amendment rights? That's me. And that's it. That's the big difference. You've got a career politician and you got a career businessman. What does the Senate need right now in a time of financial crisis? They need the businessman. They need the finance guy. And that's what I bring to the Senate.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Duggar. And that concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate this evening and inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is October 11th and early voting begins October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election, and we encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you and good night.